I DIY'd these built-ins out of stock cabinets and bookshelves on a budget. If you want to know how to do it for yourself, stay tuned because I'm about to go through it step by step. If I were to hire a carpenter or a custom cabinetry company to come in and build this for me, we're talking several $1,000s, and that just wasn't in the budget. So we're gonna do it all for about $1,500. Now stick around to the end of the video because I'm gonna break it down piece by piece how much everything costs. The goal of this project was to make it look as high-end and custom as possible while saving time and money. To do this, I utilized unfinished stock cabinets from the big box stores, plus I ordered these solid pine bookshelves and modified them to sit on top of this custom countertop I made, which is gonna hold up so much better than some of those IKEA MDF particle boards people are using all the time. I really want this to look good and last, so let's get into it. To start off this build, I need to create a base to raise up our unfinished stock cabinets so that we can add baseboard, really giving it that more custom look. The reason for this, I'm going to be using in-stock unfinished wall cabinets, which are only 12 inches deep and don't have any base, but I didn't want this to be too big and take up a ton of space in the room. To do this, I just went ahead and cut up some 2x4s and put them together with 3-inch construction screws. As you can see, I made one long side and then it wasn't quite long enough, so I made a little extra one and then screwed that together. I also added these supports just because it was a little flimsy without, and I want this to be as solid as possible. Now, we're not quite done with the base yet. I also added these extra little pieces of 2x4s on the bottom to raise it up another 1.5 inches, and also I measured to kick it out about 2 extra inches because I want the cabinets to stick out farther than the bookshelves. Now, before I actually screwed the base to the floor, I wanted to make sure that my plan was actually working, so I went ahead and grabbed those cabinets, put them up there just as a test fit. Thankfully, everything was working, so I went ahead and made sure it was nice and tight, square to the walls, and took my 3-inch construction screws and then drilled it into the floor. It's about time to get the cabinets installed, but first I needed to create a bracket along the back to attach the cabinets to, since we're kicking it out that extra 1.5 inches. I measured and placed this at the exact height of the top of the cabinets so that our countertop could extend out, sit on the front of the cabinets and on the back of this board. I do want to mention, you can see I was doing some electrical work here. I raised up the outlets so that I could add them to the back of the inside of the cabinets. Didn't want to go into too much depth though, because I'm not a professional. So if you're not sure how to do this, go ahead and consult. Maybe a local electrician can do that for you. Now, to actually get those cabinets installed, I went ahead, put them up there, and then measured the overall distance from one wall to the other, and then subtracted the total length of all 4 cabinets, which gave me a single number that I could divide for each gap. Now that I had that measurement for our spacers, I could take some poplar out to my table saw and cut it down to that width. I brought it back inside and then attached it to each side of one cabinet, utilizing clamps to make sure that it was as flush as possible. Then I used 3 cabinet screws in the top, middle, and bottom to attach it. Just a little helpful FYI, I did find it was easiest to remove the doors to do this. Now, once I had those spacers on each side of this cabinet, I put it up there with the rest of them and attached them together in a very similar process before I attached any of the cabinets to the base or the wall. After all the cabinets were secured together with those spacers, but not to the wall or the base, I double-checked the gaps on each side to make sure that they were equal, and then I started attaching it to the base first, utilizing a clamp again, making sure it was flush with the front. At this point, our cabinets are attached to the base, but not that spacer we added to the back, so I'm going to shim along the way and checking to make sure it's plumb before adding cabinet screws into that 2x4 we added earlier. Once the screw was in, I just took my multi-tool and then cut off that excess shim. Our cabinets are now solid. They are attached to the base as well as that 2x4 in the back, and it's time to make a countertop. For this, I purchased 2 1x8x12 poplar boards, and I'm going to be using a biscuit plate joiner to put them together. If you've never seen this tool before, don't freak out. It's really super easy to use, and I picked it up super cheap for about $50 at Harbor Freight. The way it works is it cuts a little slot into each side of the boards you want to merge, and then you'll go ahead and glue and use this little biscuit in those joints when you clamp it, and it creates a really strong joint. So in my case, I temporarily clamped them together and then took a framing square and made lines with a pencil every 6 to 8 inches of where I'd make a cut with my biscuit plate joiner. After I made those marks, I took it out to the garage and started making the cuts along the way. It's just super important that you be as precise as possible so that the boards will actually line up with the slots when you go to glue. Now that most of the mess is done, I brought it back inside, did a test fit to make sure that it would actually work, and then added glue on each board and in the slots, added the biscuits, added a little bit more glue on those biscuits, and then clamped it together. Now this part does take a little bit of finesse. It's important to make sure that they stay as flat as possible. So I found out after the fact it really helps to alternate clamps on the top and the bottom to help with this. After the glue dried overnight, it was successful and I could go ahead and sand the boards and especially that glue spot, making sure it was nice and smooth. I actually planned this so this would be the perfect width board, but it's too long. So I went in and measured wall to wall, made my mark, and then cut it halfway. And since it was too big, flipped it over and cut it the other half. Now here's a tip if you're a DIYer like me to get a perfect cut. I like to leave it a little bit longer than what I actually measured. And then if it's too tight, go ahead and take it out and cut again. Second time's a charm. So to secure it, I went ahead with some 1.5" screws and carefully screwed up in the middle of each cabinet. Careful not to drill through the top, and then also in the back into our 2x4. Now we're getting somewhere and it's time for the bookshelves, and I did not want to have to build these because it's a lot of work and a lot of time. So I found these solid pine bookshelves on Amazon. I'll drop a link down in the description, of course. And I'm gonna cut off the legs so that they can sit on top of our countertop and look custom. And it's a huge plus that they're solid pine because they shouldn't start sagging over time like some of those IKEA particle board or other MDF bookshelves out there, and for the price it's pretty comparable. So I measured down from the top of the cabinet and made a mark just above the legs so I knew where to cut on each side of the bookshelf. That way it's perfectly flat. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, I want to ask that you consider hitting that like button, maybe dropping a subscribe and turning on that notification bell. That way you know every time I drop a new video. I really appreciate all the support. Let's get back to it. The bookshelves also had this little rounded over detail that would stick out past the front of the cabinets. So I measured the side of the cabinet that I just cut the legs off of and cut this down to the same size so that it's all nice and flush. And the last thing before we put these together, I'm gonna give them a light scruff sand so that we can prime and paint them and adhere nice and well. So I just took my orbital sander with about 120 grit just to rough up the surface. You can kind of see it gives it a haze and it's ready for paint. After my family was so great, they put those together for me. I was able to bring them inside and really see the vision come to life. I measured to make sure that they were in line with the cabinet below, and then it added 2 screws in the studs in the back of the cabinet, and then took my 16 gauge brad nailer and nailed at an angle through the sides and into the countertop. Now that everything's secure, it's time for that secret sauce, which is adding a bunch of trim to make it look super custom. So I'm gonna be adding this backer board in the back so that when I paint it, it's perfectly smooth. Then I grab some poplar boards and cut them down to make this design I came up with, which is gonna be 2 boxes in the back, and that'll cover up that seam of the backer board we used. Now you could just go ahead and nail these trim boards into place, but I like to take it to the next level using pocket hole screws and glue. This is gonna hold up so much better over time, and it allows you to get your joints perfectly flat, and I'm telling you, it makes a big difference. I nailed into the studs where I could and then toe nailed in the places where I couldn't. Now I'm gonna go ahead and create more framing for each bookshelf. This will cover up the sides and also cover up the top gaps of the bookshelves. Now for these pieces, I also added a miter that will wrap around the side of the cabinet. So I went ahead and glued and then used my brad nailer to attach that beforehand. And now we'll go ahead and put it up on the cabinet. I confirmed that everything fit well, and once it did, I went ahead and used my brad nailer and put a few brad nails every 6 to 8 inches or so, making sure it was nice and secure. Now you probably still see that gap at the top, and we're gonna be using crown molding to take it to the ceiling, but I even take it a step further, and I like to use an upside down baseboard followed by the crown molding to give it even more personality and depth. So after I've attached the baseboard with the 2-inch brad nails, I can move on to the crown molding, and in my opinion, it really does just finish it off. After the crown molding was done, I moved on and cut this little detail trim to put inside of each of our boxes. And again, I think it's just a nice little touch. Jumping back down to the bottom of the build, I'm also going to add another poplar board just as one more step up before our baseboard. I also found this little decorative trim for in between the cabinets, and I have to say, I think it looks really good. And again, the more trim, the better. All right, we're finally about ready for paint. And to prep for this, I did caulk all the seams, fill all the nail holes, and sand them, but I didn't want to bore you with those details. Here's the interesting part. For our bookshelves, I drilled into the side and then added the little eye hooks. And then for the doors, I drilled into the bottom and added the eye hooks so that we can put them on hangers and paint both sides at the same time. To get the paint on here, I'm gonna be using a spray painter. You don't have to, but I have to tell you the finish is so much better. So you wanna cover absolutely everything, otherwise it'll be covered in paint. Here's what my painting setup looks like. Got everything covered like I mentioned earlier, masked off the cabinet boxes, and I even set up all the doors so that they're ready to be sprayed, and I have it marked where they'll go so they don't bump into each other. Here's the exact spray painter I'm using. It's a Graco X7, absolutely love it. Again, it'll be linked below. Time to get this going. So I'm gonna be using Bullseye 123 primer in gray since I'm going with a dark color. If you're gonna do a light color, go with the white. And I'm just gonna spray this on absolutely everywhere. Being careful not to apply too much. If you've never spray painted before, there is a fine line, otherwise it will drip. But once that's on there, we're gonna give it plenty of ample dry time, and now we can move on to paint. My favorite go-to cabinet paint for projects like this is Sherwin-Williams Urethane Trim Enamel, and this is in pewter green. It does not require a top coat, but you do want to give it ample dry time before really putting anything on it, because it does take a bit to cure. But once it does, it is incredibly durable, and it's water-based, so it's easy to clean up. Let me know what you think down in the comments, but I absolutely love this color, and I think it really brings a lot of personality into the office. Finally, we're wrapping things up. To get things put back together, I put the hinges back on and then attach the doors to our cabinet boxes. And last but not least, we need to add some hardware. So I marked the first door where I want it to be, and then I grabbed my handy knob jig. Love using this thing, super easy to use. Again, I'll link it below. I just have to line it up with that mark I made, and then I can quickly go down the line to each door and drill for the hole, and they should all be in a straight row. For the actual hardware, we went with this simple bronze, almost black hardware. I think it looks really good on the green. And that just about does it, guys. Let's look at the final reveal as well as the cost breakdown. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for, our cost breakdown. So our base and backer 2x4s cost $24. Our in-stock cabinets, $496. Our poplar countertop wood cost $108. Our add-on trim work, including our baseboard, crown molding, and any of those other detail trims, $251. Our solid pine bookshelves cost $528. Our paint and primer, $110. Hardware, $27, and miscellaneous like screws, filler, caulk, those kind of things, about $45, for a grand total of $1,589. And there you guys have it. That is how I DIY'd these built-ins on a budget, saving time and money. If you have any questions about the project, go ahead and drop a comment, and I will do my best to answer those for you. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys around next time.